The Hells Angels came to my uncle's funeral. What's the nicest thing you've seen a gang do? I didn't see this personally, but about 20 years ago my mother was a 5th grade teacher in Compton. For those of you who don't know, Compton pretty notorious when it comes to its concentration of gangs and gang violence, especially in the immigrant district, which is where she lived and taught. It was a pretty average night if you heard between 1 to 10 gunshots. My mom, being the faking boss that she is, refused to leave the district or teach anywhere else. Anyways, her first year teaching there she had a group of 5 boys, all of them living in destitute poverty. During break, they loved to draw pictures of cars like Lamborghinis and Porsches, all things that they could never afford. They all promised my mom that if they ever got a car, she would be the first person that they would take for a ride. Skipping ahead about 8 years, my mom was leaving the school late after staying to grade some tests. As she was walking to her car, she saw a shady group of boys leaning against a car watching her. She began to walk fast, but they boys got up and began walking towards her. All of them were wearing the telltale blue bandanas, Crips, and my mom said she could see one who was packing a Saturday night special. Anyways, just as she got to her car door, the group of boys reached her. One of them spoke in deep, intimidating voice, "Mrs. We're here to take you for a ride." My mom thought she was being kidnapped and reached for her pepper spray. Then another of the group stepped forward and introduced themselves as the 5 boys that she taught about 8 years ago. They squeezed my mom into the backseat of a rolled, beat-up Cadillac between 2 of the students. They took her to a really fancy restaurant somewhere and paid for her meal in full. Later they took her back to her car, dropped her off, and told her if she ever needed anything to call them. Then drove off. TLDR, my mom went out to some fine dining with some Crip members. Edit. Porsches, not porches. It would still be pretty cool to see someone driving a Porsche though. I ran the after school program at an elementary school in a rough part of town. Our playground was actually a city park, which meant we couldn't do the maintenance on broken equipment and I couldn't kick people out to make it safer for my kids. I'd had problems with some teen 20-something dickheads drinking and finger banging their meth head girlfriends while the kids were out playing, and goddammit, we didn't deserve to just stay inside because cops didn't patrol. My kids deserved to play. It was frustrating. One day, a couple gnarly old 1%ers approached me while we were outside, which scared me, and asked if I had been having trouble with the neighbors coming around. I told them that it had been pretty rough. One just clapped a hand on my back and said, "You ain't gonna have that no more, and I ain't gonna have no trouble from us." The next day, a biker was by the basketball court keeping watch while the kids played and left when we were done. That continued every day for the rest of the school year. Also, the guys who stood watch never smoked or cussed while the kids were out there. I don't condone their activity, but I appreciated their help. When I was younger, I lived in a relatively bad part of town. I was /am Asian/white, and most of my neighbors were black or Hispanic. I started playing sports at school and made friends with a number of kids, including this one guy named Thaddeus who was 2 years older than me. Thaddeus was a big tough kid, but a secret that he kept from a lot of people was that he sang like an angel. He told me once and sang R. Kelly's "I Believe I Can Fly," and I've never heard it done better. I swore to him I would never tell a soul, and I never did. Thaddeus got involved in some gang activity later on, and I lost touch with him until high school. I was walking home late one night when I was approached by a group of black teenagers who apparently saw me as an easy mark. I wasn't sure whether I was just going to get mugged or was going to get an ass kicking out of it too. I think my membership on the football team was the only thing that saved me from an immediate beatdown, but it wasn't going to end well. Suddenly, I hear a loud "Hey, the fuck are you doing? Leave him alone." I look over, and Thaddeus and a couple older, 20 plus, guys are pushing into this circle. Thaddeus throws an arm around my shoulders and says he's cool. "You fuck with CMXI, you fuck with me." The teenagers dispersed, and Thaddeus made sure I was okay before sending me on my way. I was a bit shook up at the time, so it wasn't until I reflected later that I realized that Thaddeus and all the older guys were pretty obviously strapped, and their status saved me from any trouble for the remainder of my time in high school. In Stockholm, Sweden in 2007, a task force of highly trained officers from the Swedish military police was tasked with hunting down and incarcerating any and all known members of the Werewolf Legion, a gang responsible for most of the cocaine and cannabis trafficking in Sweden and Finland. My cousin Andres was an affiliate of this at the time, operating a rather large marijuana grow-op in Berlin, Germany. Within a span of 8 months, 16 known affiliates to the WL were imprisoned in Sweden on charges of drug trafficking, extortion, or murder, including Andres' stepbrother, Johan. Johan was being transported to a holding facility in Halmstad, and on the way the police caravan was attacked by gang associates, believed to be part of the Ukrainian mafia. 3 officers were killed in the attack, and 1 was shot in the throat. Instead of running, while he had the chance, Johan ripped off his shirt and applied pressure to the wound on the officer's neck with it. He waited with the officer, bleeding profusely from his throat, until the paramedics and police arrived. He was later pardoned of his crimes, which were listed as 2 counts of trafficking, as well as an outstanding warrant for an assault 2 years prior in a bar in Oslo, Norway. TLDR, my cousin's stepbrother, a gang affiliate in Sweden, saved an police officer's life instead of escaping. I was visiting Central America a few years back and decided that it was a good idea to go into the projects in Managua Point. Just to paint a mental picture here, most of the houses that could actually be called houses were surrounded by brick and razor wire, and the rest were slapdash structures of sheet metal and anything else that could be found. It wasn't the nicest of places, to be sure. Anyways, I figured that it would be cool for 4 reasons. A. I'm actually a little darker than many of the locals despite my blue eyes and Eastern European heritage. B. I speak pretty good Spanish. C. I had a Salvadorian friend with me, and D. I was, at the time, the most badass motherfucker around, or so I thought. So Marcus, my Salvadorian friend, and I were walking through Camilo Ortega past a park when we see a brawl break out in the park at the end of the street. All of a sudden we hear bang bang, a gun firing into the massive bodies, and they just scatter with the shooter still popping off shots as they ran. Marcus and I were as confused as we were scared, not knowing the neighborhood, but 2 of the guys from the brawl stepped out from between 2 of the ramshackle houses to our left and basically dragged us in with them. At this point I was certain I was a dead man, but they just told us to lay low with them and they would get us out of there. They didn't ever actually identify themselves, but Marcus, who grew up surrounded by gang activity, told me he was almost certain they were M18, Mera 18, so there we were in a hut, sitting with gang members, praying we weren't about to get killed. It was a strange experience. They stayed true to their word though, and got us out of Ortega Point. Needless to say, I felt slightly less badass after that. TLDR, walking through bad neighborhood in Managua, got saved by gang members. Edit, M18, not manuscript 18. My husband and I tow our camper from Florida to Tennessee twice a year to camp in the Smokies. A good stopping point is an area called Locust Grove, Georgia. There's a cute overnight RV park close on I-75, and also the most kick-ass Mexican restaurant you'd never guess was in a strip mall where we like to grab a bite and a drink. One night we got in a little late and were finishing up dinner and watching the debut of Favre playing for the Jets on TV at the Mexican place. The game went to the half and the restaurant was closing up. We asked the waiter if he knew of any place we could catch the second half, and he pointed us to some bar across the interstate. Off we go to a little nondescript place named The Grove, seated in front of your typical interstate motel. There were just a handful of cars in the lot, but it still looked open, so we headed in. The waiter was right, they were showing the game on a big TV, so we grabbed some stools and ordered some beers. I get kind of loud watching football, especially if I've had a few. So I'll let out a few hoots and hillers, and the waitress heads over to see if we want another round. I feel dumb at this point, because I'm in a strange bar with locals, being sort of loud, so I apologized to the waitress. She replied in the heaviest sweetest Georgia drawl, "Baby, you're in a biker bar, you be as noisy as you want," and then went off to get our beers. That's when we took a good look around, and our dummies realize we are in a real life biker bar. Like, hardcore. We notice a poker game in the back room. We see the biker flags hanging. We see the bikers at the bar in the shadows. Biker. Bar. Big time. But also good football game, cold beers, and what feels to be a fairly non-threatening, laid-back environment. So, we stay late, really late, and get to know Kat the bartender, and others seated at the bar, who are all super nice. We got invited back anytime during our travels. In fact, we learned many truckers stay in the parking lot of the Grove because it's convenient, and they serve food. Kat told us we could park our rig there anytime, which killed us. Our camper was now a rig, and to just call ahead, and she'd have a hot meal waiting. She also said it's safer than the RV park, because it's a biker bar, and noon will let you get faked with, if you're our guest. So, we now hit the Grove every time we pass through on I-75. If we can point, we learned in later visits, that the gang whose bar that is are the Outlaws. They seem very nice. In fact, the last time we were there they were hosting a charity event, a chili cook-off I think, for kids. TLDR suburban couple stops in a bar on the way to go camping to see a football game. Finds out it's a very friendly biker bar belonging to the Outlaws. Goes back twice a year to say hello and have beers. I grew up in a small town, and for some odd reason 10 to 15 young guys of the Eminem variety started a gang. Then our local newspaper ran a story about how everyone knew who they were, and they were leaving graffiti all over our small town. A bunch of them got charged with some misdemeanors during the peak of their existence. At the height of their fame, our high school principal gave morning announcement basically saying, "Please stop being a gang, and please stop vandalizing stuff." It did the trick. It was really funny, because if you asked any of them about their gang, they would deny the existence. Oh, we broke it up. Too much bullshit with the police. But one guy hinted around like, "We are still a gang, we just like, a secret gang." You mean like, you guys get together on the weekends, drink Mad Dog 2020, and listen to gangster rap, hard faking core dude. One of the more prominent members went on to be a star employee at our local Radio Shack. He had the initials of the gang tattooed on his forearm in an old English font. R.N.C. Roughneck Crew, although I'm sure by now he tells people it's Republican National Committee. Yeah, I'm really big on politics and cheat. Obama in 2013 dog. Well, this isn't a gang, but certainly a story about a badass thug. Where I went to school was pretty middle class white. However, there was one part of town that was kind of rough as it butted up against the rougher town right next to us. There was a kid that went to my school that was a senior when I was a sophomore. He was honestly probably the biggest badass in my school. He was about 6'2", 240 pounds. He was all muscle, and in high school he already had a body filled up with prison-style tattoos. I know he had spent some time in juvie. One day from a distance I saw some other typical white thug kids kind of taunting a kid with obvious mental handicap issues. I couldn't quite tell what was going on though. A few seconds later I see the actual only badass I went to HS with come over and grab one of the guys. I hear him tell the kid to go pick up his faking cars. The kids kind of scramble and I see they are picking up Hot Wheels all over the locker bay. He then makes the kids apologize to the handicapped kid. They had been kicking his Hot Wheels around the locker bay while he tried to play with them. The mean kids leave, and I see the badass guy start talking to the kid about Hot Wheel cars. The rest of the school year the badass kid would bring Hot Wheels in for the handicapped kid. They would trade Hot Wheels, talk about Hot Wheels, buy each other Hot Wheels and even play with the Hot Wheels on the lunch tables. He spent so much time hanging out with this kid and his Hot Wheels. It was one of the most badass things I have ever seen. 25 years ago I was a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman. It's 4th of July. I'm in Cleveland. Mentor on the lake to be precise. Boss is pissed because the crew wasn't selling sheet, so he makes us work on 4th of July. I get dropped in a neighborhood about 3 blocks from the lake, and I start knocking on doors. I'm working my way down the street knocking on doors. Nobody home, mostly and then I turn the corner and I can see where everyone is. Big house with a huge backyard and nothing but hollies. Probably 25 to 50 of them lined up, and it's the whole cookout roast pig thing happening. Now in hindsight the whole scene was pretty chill. The wives and kids are all there. No gunfire or knife play in sight. Just the same. There's no way in hell am I knocking on this door. I'm doing my best to walk by and be invisible. Wasn't happening. Hey you. Of course it's the biggest barrel-chested dude in leather I've ever seen. He looked like he could throw a damn Harley at me. Hell, he looked like he just got done eating a Holly. And he's looking right at me. Point me. Yeah, you. Come. Here, you sure you mean me? I'm looking all around and behind me. The street is empty, boy. Don't make me come over this fence. Get the fuck over here. Point. Okay. So I walk over. Hi. Point. What the fuck are you doing in my neighborhood? Okay. Now I think I just peed myself a little. Point. I'm like a door-to-door salesman, you know. No sheet, mister. Slacks and shirt and tie with a faking backpack walking around my neighborhood. What the fuck are you selling? Encyclopedias and kids books, sir. Really? Yes, yeah. And I open my bag and haul out a book and hand it to him. Point. He takes it and he's flipping through the pages and now he's talking to me. Real conversational like, you see all these wives sitting out here with all the rugrats running around now, don't you? Yes, yeah. And you were just going to walk on by. Yes, you weren't going to knock on our door. No. No sir, are you sure? Yes sir, positive. Yes sir. Well, why the fuck not? Cute growls from assorted pit bulls and Rottweilers who had suddenly showed up because the word was out. Come see what shit your pants fear smells like. Okay, now I'm faking positive. I've pissed myself. Point. He snaps the book shut. Point. Or I'm just faking with you, dude. And with that he hollers over his shoulder. Hey, anyone wanna buy some faking encyclopedias and kids books and shit? And from the circle of wives, a voice spoke up. What you got? And the dude turns back and says, see that? You're in. Jump the fence, dude. 10 seconds later I have a chair and a beer and a dozen bikers' wives all leaning forward to see what I've got. Point. What makes the story even better is that I did actually write a deal and then they wouldn't let me leave until my boss showed up to pick me up. Point. And the roast pig was amazing. They fed me and fed me some more and everyone said goodbye when I left. Point. No kidding. Nicest people ever. First, some background. My dad has always been a little strange. He was a highly respected therapist for a number of years, but recently he has taken more of an interest in the arts. In tandem, he has always been slightly oblivious to everything around him. He'll often use phrases incorrectly, not think before he speaks, etc. Okay, so a few years ago, our family came into a bit of money, and my dad got a hold of the credit card before anyone else. I don't know what he was thinking, but he purchased a club in a more unsavory neighborhood that specialized in drag queen shows. He was able to get an amazing price because the neighborhood was so bad. Naturally, everyone in the family was furious. Anyways, the first people he encountered while inspecting the property and surrounding areas were what he assumed to be a street gang, but were, in fact, a group of homosexual dancers. My dad, being the considerate man that he is, brought them into the club and taught them to dance, believing that he had just converted an inner city gang. They then went outside to convert more gang members to the song and dance lifestyles and promptly had the shit kicked out of them by a bunch of Mexicans. But that fake homosexual gang gave my dad hope that he was pursuing the right path. Point. TLDR, homosexual dance gang teach my dad the wrong lesson. My uncle tells the story of when he was a young teenager. He and a friend in Cancton, Louisiana in the early 70s found an old motorcycle off the road with a bunch of other junk, like refrigerators, etc. They took it home, and for months were working on it, trying to get it running, saving up money or things to barter for parts, used tires and such. It had no muffler, and once they got it running they would roll it down to the parish line and ride it up and down the fields out there. It was so loud that the farmers ended up calling the sheriff after a few weeks, and he busted them walking the bike back after a ride. With no title, no license, and a strong fear of my grandfather finding out they had it and had been spending money on it. They were quite poor at the time. The sheriff said he had to tell my grandfather, but also had an idea. 2 days later the sheriff pulls up to the farm in the morning, and behind him is about 13 to 14 bandidos. Sheriff tells my grandfather that his son has been fixing up a motorcycle and riding it illegally. When my grandfather starts to get upset, one of the bandits asks to see the bike. My uncle and his friend take him to where they hide it, and several of the bandits inspect the work, are impressed they got it running, show them things that were put on backwards or wasn't aligned. Apparently the forks were very delicate to align, and they brought a tool to do it, and they spent the day fixing this bike and getting it straight. Ready. Once it's done, one of the bandits is alone with my uncle in the barn, crouches down, tells him he did a damn fine job fixing that bike and hands him an envelope with $500 in it. He says the money is not for the bike, but for the labor. The MC rides the bike out, and my uncle foolishly thinks if he shows that his hard work in getting the motorcycle fixed was of value because of the money, that my grandfather will be less upset. When he tells them about the money, my grandmother says, "Praise the Lord. I prayed and prayed for the Lord to help out this family, and he delivered the help we needed." Took the money from my uncle and never mentioned it again. My uncle never rode a motorcycle again. Personally, I hate seeing motorcycle clubs described as gangs. There are many different clubs, lots of different missions and ethics. Honestly though, besides that they are doing it to get brownie points, to do their bad things mentality, there are lots of people that have been affected in a positive way by clubs. I was in one, full patched member, for over a year. No, it was not the Outlaws as my username alludes. That's only a playful take on an old nickname of mine. The club I rode with was a national club and was territorial. I can say from experience we put a lot of work into Christmas toy drives, food pantries and real church contributions. Local church helped as a homeless shelter, drug rehab with counseling. I can tell you that not the biggest meanest dude in that club didn't have a tear in their eye watching a 5-year-old boy or girl open a gift they would have never gotten from their parents. Nor did they miss seeing their eyes light up when the doors to the clubhouse were opened and there was a full Thanksgiving meal on spread, the first of many for a lot of those kids. Aside from the gang related activities, club folks are human. They have hearts, some bigger than others, but they are there. I grew up in a city of about 34,000 give or take. Haven't been back in a few years, and it was slashes taking a turn for the worse with Bloods and LK. This is in central Illinois, so neither are very intimidating, but have both been known to do drive-bys and shootings. But we had a biker club called Sons of Silence, scariest guys I have ever met. They still believed in shooting someone, or at least beating someone horribly for disrespecting family or members. I grew up going to the bars with my family and we were friends with a lot of the SOS members, so I pretty much got through high school and middle school without ever being jumped, even though I was a scrawny white guy with shoulder-length blonde hair. But time for an actual story. I was walking home from school one day in 4th grade carrying a huge poster board for a project. The poster was probably bigger than me, and it was a really windy day. I was having a lot of trouble carrying it with me and decided to take a shortcut through the back of a gas station to stop the wind. Well, behind the gas station there were a few bikers relaxing after stopping to get something to drink. One asked what I was doing, so I told him, and he offered to help me home. I thanked him for it, and he carried the poster for me all the way home, while asking about how I was doing in school, and when we got to my house he told me I had to stay in school and get good grades. Best advice I've gotten from the most random of places. I had just arrived at a nearby grocery store on a fall afternoon. Everything seemed normal as I got out of my car. However, when I reached the end of the parking lot and looked at the store, I spotted them. There were 5 or 6 gang members standing in front of store's entrance. They all looked young, but they definitely had the attire of a fairly large gang in the nearby area: hats, shirts, pants, etc. As I approached them, I was repeating to myself in my head, "Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact." I must have repeated that a dozen times. Luckily, as one of the boys starts to approach me, a lady hastily walked towards the store and caught his attention. Along with the other gang members, the gang members started to initiate a conversation with the lady. As they talked about something, I did not really listen. I just wanted to quickly go past them. I sped up to go into the store, barely escaping their grasp. Once I finished my shopping, the hard part came, going back to my car. I planned ahead and only bought things I could carry in the plastic bags. The cart was too big of a risk. Regrettably, I bought one or two more things than what I could comfortably handle. So as I started approach the exit I could feel something about to fall out of the back. I go through the automatic doors and made eye contact with one of them. I quickly look away and in my head I'm cursing at myself for making such a foolish mistake. The gang member that I had made eye contact with started to approach me and said something. I ignored him and rapidly walked to my car. It is no use. The boy is still walking towards me saying something. I speed up even more and then I hear something fall from one of my bags. For a split second I contemplate on what to do. Ultimately, I decide it is a lost cause and continue my fast walk to my car. The boy is still on my tail. I finally reach my car, but with my hands full I cannot reach into my pockets for the car keys. I quickly drop the groceries from one of my hands to get the keys. I fumble the keys around trying to stick into the lock as I hear the boy's footsteps getting louder and louder until nothing. As I unlock the door I look to my right and see the boy standing there with a smirk on his face, holding my sacrifice grocery item. I'm terrified inside and thinking the worst. Then to my surprise he comes closer to me and says, "Mister, you dropped this." I hesitantly say thanks, thinking that there was nothing to fear. I grab the item and start putting my groceries away. As I finish, I noticed the boy still there, and right then he says something along the lines of, "Hi, I'm from Boy Scout Troop 100 selling popcorn to raise money to go to summer camp. Would you like to buy some? TLDR. They are after your money." I was about 15 years old at the time when I went to a liquor store in Pasadena, California with my buddy that looks like a Charlo but wasn't one. Drunk as all hell we stumble into the store for a sober drink since we were too trashed to drink anything else. As I'm perusing the Born mags I hear my friend let out a quat or sheet. I notice 4 Charlos outside staring at us while talking to each other. I know that look they are giving us. For some reason gangsters tend to be intimidated or feel threatened when in my friend's presence, even when he's not doing anything. Now I've seen my friend in action in our old backyard boxing matches, but he had a one-hit knockout punch in his arsenal, so I wasn't too afraid for him. I was more afraid for myself, since I was way too drunk to fight. So since we know what's about to happen he tells me to buy a drink with a glass bottle. I do so, and as we are stepping out of the store we hear those infamous words, "Where you from?" "Eats, great, we're being hit up. No turning back, now it's on." "We are from nowhere," my boy says. They reply with a, "Nah, fuck that, you're in our hood homes. Villa boys, you two faggots." Awesome. Well, if it's gonna go down, then here we go. As I'm getting ready to throw, 3 Lowrider cars come up next to us. Great, I thought, more of them to fight. But as I thought that I notice the people in the Lowriders are black. One jumps out with a police nightstick and yells, "Where y'all beaches from, cuz?" ABC Altadena Block Cripsy UHZ. My friend and I look at each other, smile and tell them, "We ain't from nowhere. But these punks are from Villa boys." Got the look on their faces, priceless. Oh okay, good looking, cuz as a matter of fact we been searching for them. They tell us, "Y'all wanna fuck 'em up with us." We keep their wallets though, cuz as all 3 Lowriders unload their passengers, about 12 to 14, me and my friend look at each other, laugh, say no, check my pants for defecation, and went about our night. I used to work as a caretaker for an old home in a pretty sketchy neighborhood. The place had historical value. It was an old manor home, but had been let go to rot along with the rest of that neighborhood. This husband and wife lawyer team wanted to get the place protected as a historical landmark, but they needed me to oversee its reconstruction and maintenance. While they worked their regular jobs, the neighborhood had a few different gangs, but by far the saddest of them was this group of homeless kids who would sneak into homes to steal food for themselves and their pet dog. Personally, I was fine looking the other way, but a lot of others accused them of being irresponsible druggies who always seemed to have cash for weed. Just to be clear, I never saw them do any drugs. It was mostly rumor. Most construction crews refused to work in my neighborhood because of the gangs, so we were stuck with these local dumb fucks who had only just found enough brain cells to be subpar day laborers instead of gangbangers. None of them knew shit about restoring old homes, but they worked for next to nothing, and they were our only option point. So one day, the foreman, a dude who really didn't deserve the title, comes up to me to say that the crew is refusing to work. They think the house is haunted. College does not prepare you for trying to reassure superstitious Charles that ghosts don't exist, and not all rundown houses are trying to murder you like in the movies. I've got the lawyers on one side breathing down my neck to get this job done, or they'll have to demolish the place, and a total work stoppage on the other end, because of mystical spirits or some shit. Now in come these burnt out teenage hobos who somehow show up just as the shit's going down, and they've got some sob story for me about their car breaking down. From what I'd heard, that was their usual trick, make up a sob story to get in the house, then steal your food. I guess they just saw a fancy old house and figured we'd be loaded with things to steal. I went ahead and explained the whole situation to them. I hadn't had a chance to vent or pet a dog in a while, and it felt good to indulge. When I finished talking, one of the kids out of the blue promises that they'll fix it for me and gets his friends to go along with him. The next day, the kids had actually caught the ghost the female lawyer was trying to scare off the construction crew so she could buy out her husband's share of the property, demolish it, and build affordable housing for low-income families. The crazy beach probably would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those meddling kids. Growing up I never had a dog, but always wished for one. Come 5th grade we moved into a new neighborhood and there was a neighbor dog that was a Malamute that became friends with me. Every morning he'd walk me to my bus stop, meet me there when I was out of school, play with me outside pretty much all day every day. The dog should have been mine, but it wasn't. Well, we also had a neighbor who lived in one of those shady wood fenced houses with 5 dogs who were extremely vicious and always tried to get out and attack people. It was after about a year of them pushing on the fence that it finally broke, and I was outside playing in the yard while the dog, Cody, was laying in the grass. These dogs immediately saw me and my small stature and came rushing at me like a pack of wolves. As they got closer, one of the dogs leaped into the air straight towards me. I yelled and out of nowhere Cody side tackles the dog in midair and gnaws up the rest of them in a fight. They stood no chance against this beast. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, and while this wasn't a biker or gang story, this is one of my favorite moments of my childhood of an unexpected triumph. TLDR, Malamutes are the shit who save little boys. I took my SATs in Newark on June 2nd, because I signed up late. It was either Newark or the Bronx and I live in Essex County, so Newark it was. Throughout the exam, 3 black kids dressed with red bandanas, Chicago Bulls jerseys, and baggy carpenter jeans were joking, laughing, and generally being disruptive. Why they were even taking the test in the first place is a mystery to me. Anyway, after the exam was over they stood up, looked at each other, and walked towards me. Now, I know I shouldn't have been wearing my white gold Faravaha necklace in Newark, but my grandfather sent it to me from Iran and it's my good luck charm. Anyway, one of them saw it poking out of my button-down shirt and smiled and said, "I shit you not, this is exactly how he said it. Yo nigga, that's some serious bling you got on. Look real expensive and shit." His friends simply nodded in agreement. I explained to them what it was, and the same guy replied with Zoro what? The fact that? After explaining the fundamentals of Zoroastrianism, not to convert them or anything, just to explain to the Three Bloods members, the guy said it was the same guy every time. The other 2 didn't talk. That's some dope as shit, nigga. I mean, we be Nation of Islam, ya heard? But I'm digging that ancient shit. I might look into it someday. Yo, chain looking real good, my man. You should probably take it off and keep it in yo pocket. Awesome shit word. Don't want nothing to happen to it. Bad neighborhood and shit. Stay true, nigga. The main guy tilted his head in a beckoning motion and the 3 of them promptly left. Cool guys. Glad they didn't mug me.